Wyoming Territory, 1872. Prudence Zimmer pressed her forehead against the train window, watching the endless prairie roll past. The glass felt cool against her skin despite the September sun, a welcome relief from the heat that had built up in the passenger car during the long journey west. 3 weeks of travel had left her exhausted, her once neat blue traveling dress wrinkled and dusty. Her blonde hair, normally pinned in a tidy chignon, had begun to escape its confines, wisps curling around her face in the humidity. "Last stop, Clearwater," the conductor called, moving through the car. Clearwater, Wyoming Territory. Prudence's stomach tightened. This was it. The moment she had both longed for and dreaded since leaving Philadelphia. She gathered her reticule and straightened her hat, checking her reflection in the window. 26 years old, and traveling across the country to marry a man she had never met. The thought still seemed incredible, even after all these weeks. The train whistle shrieked, and the massive iron wheels screeched against the tracks as they slowed. Prudence took a deep breath, smoothing her skirts one last time. The letter from Mr. Garrett O'Malley was carefully folded in her pocket, the advertisement that had changed everything when she'd seen it in the matrimonial news 3 months ago. Rancher seeks bride. Must be practical, hardworking, and willing to help raise a child. Will provide comfortable home and respectful treatment. It had been his mention of a child that had caught her attention. After the fever that had taken her parents and left her alone in the world, working as a seamstress to barely keep a roof over her head, the thought of a family of her own had been too powerful to resist. The train jolted to a stop. Passengers stood, gathering belongings and moving toward the exits. Prudence remained seated, summoning her courage. Through the window, she could see the small frontier town, a dusty main street lined with wooden buildings, a church steeple rising in the distance, horses tied at hitching posts. It was another world from Philadelphia's cobblestone streets and brick row houses. When most of the other passengers had departed, Prudence finally rose, took her carpet bag from the overhead rack, and made her way to the exit. The conductor helped her down onto the wooden platform, tipping his hat. "Welcome to Clearwater, miss." She nodded her thanks, scanning the station anxiously. Mr. O'Malley had promised to meet her, but the platform was nearly empty now. A few townspeople were walking away, and a station master was directing the unloading of freight. But there was no sign of anyone waiting for her. Prudence set her bag down and opened her reticule, taking out the letter to confirm the date. Yes, September 12th. Today. Her heart sank as minutes passed. Perhaps he had forgotten. Or worse, changed his mind. After half an hour, the platform had cleared entirely. The station master approached, his expression sympathetic. "Waiting for someone, miss?" "Yes," Prudence replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "Mr. Garrett O'Malley. He was to meet me here." The man's face changed, just slightly, but enough for her to notice. "O'Malley's place is about 5 miles out of town. I can have my boy drive you out there, if you'd like." "That would be most kind," she said, relief washing through her. The station master called to a young man loading crates, and soon Prudence found herself on a buckboard wagon headed out of town, her carpet bag beside her, anxiety building with every turn of the wheels. "What can you tell me about Mr. O'Malley?" she asked the boy driving the wagon. He glanced at her, then back at the road. "Keeps to himself mostly. Good rancher, though. Has a nice spread. And his daughter?" She remembered the mention of a child. "Lily? Sweet little thing. Don't talk much, though, not since her ma died." Prudence's heart constricted. "How old is she?" "5, I reckon. Maybe 6 now." The wagon rolled along a rutted dirt road, past vast expanses of grassland dotted with grazing cattle. In the distance, mountains rose against the impossibly blue sky. It was beautiful, in a wild, untamed way that both frightened and exhilarated her. Finally, they crested a rise, and the boy pointed. "That's the O'Malley place." A 2-story wooden farmhouse stood in a small valley, surrounded by outbuildings, corrals, and a barn. Smoke rose from the chimney, and a vegetable garden was visible to one side. It was modest but well-kept, speaking of hard work and care. As they approached, Prudence saw a tall man emerge from the barn, shading his eyes against the sun. Her heart quickened. This must be him. He was broader than she had imagined, with dark hair and a beard that couldn't hide his strong jawline. He wore a simple flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing tanned forearms, and denim trousers tucked into worn boots. The wagon pulled into the yard, and the man approached, his expression unreadable. Prudence swallowed hard. "Mr. O'Malley?" she ventured. He nodded once. "Miss Zimmer, I reckon?" "Yes. I expected you at the station." He rubbed the back of his neck, looking uncomfortable. "There was a problem with one of the horses. I was coming, but—" He gestured vaguely toward the barn. An awkward silence fell between them. This wasn't the welcome she had imagined. "I can take you back to town," the station master's son offered, clearly sensing the tension. "No," Garrett said quickly. "No need for that." He stepped forward and offered his hand to help her down from the wagon. "Come inside, Miss Zimmer. You must be tired from your journey." His hand was calloused but gentle as he assisted her down. Up close, she could see his eyes were a deep green, with lines at the corners that suggested both laughter and hardship. "Thank you for the ride," she told the boy, who nodded, handed down her carpetbag, and turned the wagon around. Left alone with Garrett, Prudence felt suddenly shy. This man was to be her husband, yet he was a complete stranger. "The house is this way," he said, picking up her bag. "Watch your step." He led her to the house and held the door for her. Inside, it was plain but tidy. A large kitchen with a wood stove, a wooden table with chairs, simple curtains at the windows. A doorway led to what appeared to be a sitting room with a stone fireplace. "It's very nice," she said, meaning it. After the cramped room she had rented in Philadelphia, the farmhouse seemed spacious and solid. Garrett set her bag down. "Lily's at the neighbor's today. Mrs. Cooper watches her sometimes when I have work to do." He paused. "I should explain something, Miss Zimmer." The serious tone of his voice made her heart sink. "Yes. I wasn't exactly expecting you." Prudence stared at him. "But, your letter. You wrote that you were seeking a bride." "I did, yes. Months ago." He ran a hand through his dark hair. "But when I didn't hear back, I assumed no one was interested. I didn't know you were coming until the telegraph arrived yesterday." "Telegraph?" Prudence shook her head. "I didn't send any telegraph. I replied to your letter and received confirmation of our arrangement. I have it here." She reached into her pocket for the paper. Garrett took it, his brow furrowed as he read. "This isn't my handwriting," he said finally. "I think there's been some kind of mistake." Prudence felt the blood drain from her face. She sank into a kitchen chair, suddenly lightheaded. "Then you're not. You don't." "I did place the advertisement," he said quickly, sitting across from her. "But I never received your response. This letter, I think someone else wrote it." "Who would do such a thing?" she whispered. Garrett's expression darkened. "I have my suspicions. There's a woman in town, Agatha Henderson. She runs the post office, and has made it clear she'd like to be more than friends. She might have intercepted your letter and decided to answer it herself. But why would she send me here if she wants you for herself?" He sighed. "Agatha doesn't think things through sometimes. Or maybe she thought you'd take one look at me and the ranch and head back east." He studied her face. "I'm sorry you've come all this way for nothing, Miss Zimmer." The full weight of her situation descended on Prudence. Thousands of miles from home, her meager savings spent on the journey, and now no marriage prospect awaiting her. "What will I do?" she murmured, more to herself than to him. Before Garrett could answer, the door opened, and a small figure appeared. A little girl with dark hair and two braids, wearing a simple calico dress and carrying a cloth doll. She stopped short when she saw Prudence, her eyes, the same deep green as her father's, growing wide. "Lily," Garrett said, rising. "I thought you were staying with Mrs. Cooper until supper." "She had to go help Mrs. Taylor with the new baby," the child said softly, her eyes never leaving Prudence. "Who is she, Pa?" "This is Miss Zimmer," Garrett explained. "She's visiting." Prudence smiled gently at the little girl. "Hello, Lily. It's very nice to meet you." Lily approached cautiously, clutching her doll. She studied Prudence's face, her dress, her hands. Then, in a voice so quiet it was barely audible, she asked, "Are you going to be my new ma?" Prudence felt her heart break a little at the hope in the child's voice. She glanced at Garrett, unsure how to answer. "Lily," he began, his voice gentle but firm. "Miss Zimmer just arrived. And we haven't. Because I asked Jesus to send me a mommy," Lily continued, moving closer to Prudence. "Every night. And you're pretty, like Pa said my real ma was." She reached out tentatively and touched the fabric of Prudence's sleeve. "Your dress is soft." Prudence swallowed the lump in her throat. "Thank you, Lily. That's very sweet of you to say." The little girl took a step closer. Do you know stories? Mrs. Cooper doesn't tell good ones. I know many stories, Prudence answered. Would you like to hear one sometime? Lily nodded eagerly. Then, with the directness only a child could manage, whispered, Can you be my mommy? The room fell silent. Garrett looked stricken, clearly torn between his daughter's obvious longing and the impossibility of the situation. Prudence felt tears prick her eyes. Lily, Garrett said finally, Miss Zimmer has had a very long journey. Why don't you go wash up for supper, and we can all talk later? After a moment's hesitation, Lily nodded and disappeared through a doorway. Garrett turned to Prudence, his expression apologetic. I'm sorry about that. Since her mother died 3 years ago, she's been... He trailed off, shaking his head. I've done my best, but a ranch is no place for a man to raise a daughter alone. That's why you placed the advertisement, Prudence said softly. Yes. His eyes met hers, and she saw the weariness in them, the weight of responsibility. Miss Zimmer, I don't want you to feel trapped. There's a boarding house in town. I'd be happy to pay for your stay until you decide what you want to do. It was a generous offer, one that acknowledged the difficult position she was in. And yet, as Prudence looked around the kitchen, at the child's drawing pinned to the wall, the small boots by the door, the dough covered with a cloth on the counter, she felt something unexpected, a sense of possibility. Mr. O'Malley, she said carefully, may I make a suggestion? He nodded, waiting. Perhaps I could stay here, just for a week or two. As a trial. I'm a good cook and seamstress, and I've taught children before. I could help with Lily and the household while we get to know one another. She took a deep breath. If, after that time, you don't think I would make a suitable wife and mother, I'll accept your help in finding another situation. Garrett studied her face, surprise evident in his expression. You'd consider staying? Even knowing this wasn't what you expected. I came west for a new beginning, she said simply. Perhaps this is it, just not in the way I imagined. A small smile, the first she'd seen, touched his lips. You're a brave woman, Miss Zimmer. Prudence, she offered. If we're to live under the same roof, even temporarily, you should call me Prudence. Garrett, he returned. He extended his hand across the table, and she placed hers in it. His grip was firm and warm. 2 weeks, then. A trial. As their hands separated, Prudence felt a flutter of something like hope in her chest. It wasn't what she had traveled all this way for, but somehow, in this kitchen with the scent of bread rising and the sound of a child's humming from the next room, it felt like the beginning of something true. The first few days on the O'Malley ranch passed in a blur of activity. Prudence rose early each morning, determined to prove her worth. She prepared breakfasts of flapjacks and eggs, swept the wooden floors, and began organizing the household that had clearly been managed with a bachelor's efficiency rather than a woman's touch. Lily followed her everywhere, a shadow in a calico dress, watching with solemn eyes as Prudence hung fresh curtains or kneaded dough for bread. The child rarely spoke, but her presence was a constant, comforting in its own way. Garrett maintained a polite distance. He worked from sunrise to sunset, coming in for meals with his hair damp from washing up at the pump outside, his shirt clean but his hands still bearing the evidence of a rancher's labor. He answered Prudence's questions about the ranch and the area, but volunteered little about himself. On the 4th evening, as Prudence was tucking Lily into bed, the little girl finally spoke more than a few words at once. Pa says you might not stay, she said, her fingers tracing the stitching on her quilt. Prudence smoothed a dark curl from the child's forehead. Your father and I made an agreement to try living together for 2 weeks. Then we'll decide. But you could stay forever? If you wanted to. The hope in Lily's voice made Prudence's heart ache. I would like to stay, she said carefully. I like it here very much. Then you will stay, Lily said with a child's certainty. And be my mommy. It's not quite that simple, sweetheart. Lily's brow furrowed. Why not? Don't you like Pop? Prudence felt heat rise to her cheeks. Your father is a good man, she said. But marriage is a serious decision. We barely know each other. Ma knew Pa for 3 whole weeks before they got married, Lily informed her. Mrs. Cooper told me so. Prudence couldn't help smiling. Is that so? Lily nodded solemnly. And they were happy. Before Ma got sick. Her little face grew serious. If you stayed, would you get sick too? The question caught Prudence off guard. Oh, Lily. No one can promise never to get sick. But I'm very healthy, and I would do everything I could to stay well for you and your father. The child seemed satisfied with this answer. Will you tell me a story? About princesses? Relieved by the change of subject, Prudence began a tale of a brave princess who rescued a kingdom. By the time she finished, Lily's eyes were heavy with sleep. Prudence leaned down and kissed her forehead, a gesture that felt both new and somehow natural. "Good night, sweet girl." "Night, Miss Prudence," Lily murmured. Then, just as she was drifting off, she added, "I love you." Prudence froze, her hand on the doorknob. The simple declaration, offered with a child's innocent trust, pierced her heart. She closed the door quietly behind her, then leaned against the wall in the hallway, eyes closed, trying to regain her composure. "She's never said that to anyone but me." Prudence's eyes flew open. Garrett stood at the end of the hall, watching her, his expression unreadable in the lamplight. "I'm sorry," she stammered. "I didn't mean to, no." He took a step closer. "Don't apologize. It's good, her opening up to you." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she was beginning to recognize as a sign of his discomfort. Lily's mother, Sarah, died of consumption. It was slow, painful to watch. Lily was only 3, but she remembers. She used to have nightmares. That's why she asked if I would get sick. Garrett nodded. She's afraid of losing someone else she cares about. The implication hung in the air between them. Lily cared for her already, after less than a week. The responsibility of that trust was enormous. "Would you like some coffee?" Garrett asked suddenly. "I usually sit up a while after Lily's asleep." Surprised by the invitation, Prudence nodded. "I'd like that." They went downstairs to the kitchen, where Garrett lit a lamp and put the coffee pot on the stove. Prudence sat at the table, watching him move about the kitchen with the ease of long habit. "You cook," she observed. He glanced over his shoulder with a half-smile. "Had to learn. Can't feed a child on burnt beans and tough beef every night." "You've done well with her," Prudence said. "She's a wonderful little girl." "She is." He set 2 mugs on the table and poured the coffee. "But she needs more than I can give her alone." He sat across from Prudence, wrapping his hands around the mug. "She needs a mother." The directness of his statement startled her. "Is that why you're allowing me to stay?" "For Lily." He considered this, his green eyes thoughtful. "Partly. But also because you're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone more delicate. Less willing to roll up her sleeves and work." He took a sip of coffee. "You've impressed me, Prudence." The compliment warmed her more than it should have. "Thank you. The truth is, I've been taking care of myself since I was 16. My parents died of fever, and I had to make my own way." "As a seamstress?" "Yes, and occasionally as a tutor for merchants' children." She traced the rim of her mug with her finger. "It was a respectable living, but lonely. When I saw your advertisement, I thought perhaps I could find more than just security here." "What else were you looking for?" His voice had softened. She met his eyes. "A family." Something flickered in his gaze. Recognition, perhaps, or understanding. For a long moment, they just looked at each other, the kitchen quiet except for the occasional pop from the stove. "I should tell you," he said finally, "the ranch isn't always this peaceful. Winter can be harsh here. Spring brings calving, which means sleepless nights. There are droughts, blizzards, wolves that threaten the herd. I'm not afraid of hard work or hardship, Garrett." He studied her face, as if searching for something. "No, I don't believe you are." He hesitated, then added, "But a life here, with me, it wouldn't be like the lives of ladies back east. I can't offer fine dresses or theater outings or sophisticated conversation." Prudence smiled. "I've never been to the theater, and my most sophisticated conversations in Philadelphia were with the milliner's cat." She grew serious. "I don't need luxuries, Garrett. I need purpose. Connection." She gestured around the kitchen. "In just a few days, this place has begun to feel more like home than my room in Philadelphia ever did." His expression softened. "I'm glad to hear that." "Are you?" she asked boldly. "Truly." Garrett set his mug down and leaned forward. "Truly. When you first arrived, I was caught off guard. But now," he shook his head, as if surprised by his own thoughts, "now I find myself hoping you'll want to stay." The admission hung between them, changing the air in the room. Prudence felt her pulse quicken. It wasn't a declaration of love. They were both too practical for that. But it was an opening, an acknowledgement of possibility. "We still have 10 days, she reminded him, trying to keep her voice steady. "To decide." "Yes." He rose from the table. "And we should both get some rest. Morning comes early on a ranch." He walked her to the foot of the stairs, where they paused, suddenly awkward again. "Good night, Prudence." "Good night, Garrett." As she climbed the stairs to the small bedroom that had been prepared for her, Prudence felt a curious lightness in her chest. Not quite happiness, not yet, but its precursor, hope, taking root and beginning to grow. The days began to take on a rhythm. Mornings were for household tasks and helping Lily with her letters and numbers. Afternoons, Prudence often joined Garrett outside, learning about the ranch, how to gather eggs without startling the hens, how to tell when the vegetables in the garden were ready for picking, how to recognize the different sounds the cattle made and what they meant. On the 8th day, a thunderstorm rolled in from the mountains, turning the sky an ominous gray-green. Garrett and his hired hand, a quiet man named Thomas, rushed to secure the animals and equipment. Prudence and Lily watched from the porch as the first fat raindrops began to fall. "Pa doesn't like storms," Lily confided, pressing against Prudence's side. "Is that so?" Prudence put an arm around the child's shoulders. "Many people don't." Lily shook her head. "It's not that. The lightning reminds him of the war." Prudence looked down at her in surprise. "Your father fought in the war?" Lily nodded. "He doesn't talk about it, but sometimes he gets real quiet when there's thunder." She looked up at Prudence with serious eyes. "Maybe you could help him not be scared." Before Prudence could respond, Garrett came jogging across the yard, rain plastering his shirt to his body. He reached the porch just as a brilliant flash of lightning split the sky, followed immediately by a deafening crack of thunder. Lily jumped, and Prudence instinctively tightened her arm around her. But it was Garrett's reaction that caught her attention, a slight flinch, a momentary blankness in his eyes before he seemed to shake it off. "Inside, both of you," he said, ushering them through the door. "This is going to be a bad one." The storm raged for hours, rattling the windows and sending torrents of rain down the roof. Prudence kept Lily occupied with stories and simple sewing projects, showing her how to make a doll's blanket from scraps of fabric. Garrett moved restlessly from window to window, checking on the barn, the corrals, the road that was rapidly turning to mud. As evening fell and Lily went to bed, the storm showed no signs of abating. Prudence found Garrett in the sitting room, standing by the window, his posture tense as he watched the lightning illuminate the yard. "Can I bring you some tea?" she offered. "Or perhaps something stronger?" He turned, seeming almost surprised to find her there. "No, thank you. I'm fine." Another crash of thunder shook the house, and this time Prudence saw it clearly. The way his hands clenched, the small step backward, the quickening of his breath. Without thinking, she crossed the room and placed her hand on his arm. "Lily told me about the war," she said softly. "That the storms remind you." Garrett's jaw tightened. She shouldn't have said anything. "She's concerned about you. As am I." He moved away from her touch, running a hand over his face. "It's nothing. Just memories sometimes. Would it help to talk about them?" "No." His voice was sharp, but then he sighed. "I'm sorry. I don't mean to be harsh. But some things are better left in the past." Prudence nodded, understanding. "Then we won't speak of it. But perhaps you could use some distraction." She gestured to the small bookshelf in the corner. "Would you read to me? My eyes are tired from sewing in poor light." It was a transparent excuse, but Garrett seemed to recognize and appreciate the effort. After a moment, he nodded and selected a book, a collection of Tennyson's poems that looked well worn, its spine cracked from frequent use. They sat together on the sofa, a respectable distance between them, as Garrett began to read. His voice, deep and steady, gradually drowned out the storm's fury. Prudence watched his profile in the lamplight, the strong line of his jaw, the way his brow furrowed slightly in concentration, the occasional pause when thunder rolled across the sky. By the time he closed the book an hour later, the storm had moved eastward, its power diminished to occasional rumbles in the distance. And something had changed between them, a new understanding, a layer of reserve peeled away. "Thank you," he said simply. Prudence smiled. "For what?" "For seeing what I needed, even when I didn't." The honesty in his voice touched her. "That's what." She hesitated, then finished. "That's what friends do." But they both knew the word friends wasn't quite right. Not anymore. The next morning dawned clear and fresh, the storm having washed everything clean. Puddles dotted the yard, reflecting the blue sky, and the mountains in the distance seemed sharper, more defined. Prudence was in the kitchen, preparing breakfast, when Garrett entered, dressed for riding. "I need to check the north pasture," he said. "Make sure none of the cattle broke through the fence during the storm. Would you and Lily like to come along? I could pack a lunch." The invitation surprised and pleased her. "I'm sure Lily would love that. And so would I." An hour later, the three of them were in Garrett's wagon, heading across the ranch. Lily sat between them on the bench seat, chattering excitedly about the meadowlarks and prairie dogs they spotted along the way. Garrett pointed out landmarks: the creek where he watered the cattle in summer, the hill where wildflowers bloomed in spring, the distant line of trees that marked the boundary of his property. They stopped at the north pasture, where Garrett checked the fences while Prudence and Lily spread a blanket under a solitary cottonwood tree. The day was warm for September, the sun bright but not hot, a perfect autumn day. "Look, Miss Prudence," Lily called, pointing to a butterfly that had landed on a nearby thistle. "It's so pretty." "It is indeed," Prudence agreed, watching the child's delight with a smile. "Shall we see if we can find more?" They spent the next hour exploring the meadow, collecting interesting rocks and leaves, while Garrett rode the perimeter of the pasture. When he returned, they sat together on the blanket, eating the simple lunch Prudence had packed: cold chicken, apple slices, and bread with honey. "Is this what it's always like?" Prudence asked, gesturing to the panorama around them: the rolling grassland, the mountains, the vast sky. "So beautiful it almost hurts to look at it." Garrett followed her gaze. "Not always. Sometimes it's so cold your breath freezes in your beard. Sometimes it's so dry everything turns brown and the cattle get thin. Sometimes it's so windy you can't stand upright." He paused. "But yes, days like this make up for all the rest." "I've never seen anything like it," she admitted. "In Philadelphia, everything is so contained. Buildings and streets and fences everywhere. You can't see the horizon." "Do you miss it?" he asked. "The city?" Prudence considered this, watching a hawk circle lazily overhead. "I miss certain things. Books mostly, and music sometimes. But no, I don't miss the city itself." She looked at him. "I feel more alive here than I ever did there." Something flickered in his eyes: pleasure, perhaps, or relief. Before he could respond, Lily tugged at his sleeve. "Pa, can we show Miss Prudence the special place?" "Please." Garrett hesitated, then nodded. "If Miss Prudence would like to see it." "I would," she said, intrigued. They packed up the remains of their lunch, and Garrett led them along a narrow trail that wound up a gentle slope. At the top was a small clearing surrounded by young pine trees. In the center stood a simple wooden cross, weathered by the elements, but still standing straight. Prudence realized immediately what it was: Sarah's grave. Lily ran forward and knelt beside the cross, placing a wildflower she had picked at its base. "Hello, Ma," she said softly. "I brought someone to meet you." Prudence glanced uncertainly at Garrett, who gave her a small nod. She moved forward and knelt beside Lily. "Hello, Mrs. O'Malley," she said gently. "You have a beautiful daughter." Lily beamed at her, then looked back at the cross. "Miss Prudence is very nice, Ma. She tells good stories and makes the best flapjacks and knows how to sew doll clothes." Prudence felt a lump form in her throat as the child continued listing her virtues, as if making a case to her mother for why Prudence should stay. Behind them, Garrett stood silent, his hat in his hands. When Lily had finished her one-sided conversation, she stood and brushed the grass from her dress. "I'm going to look for more flowers," she announced, skipping off to the edge of the clearing. Prudence rose more slowly, acutely aware of Garrett's presence behind her. "Thank you," she said, turning to face him, "for bringing me here. It's a beautiful spot." He nodded, his eyes on the simple grave. "Sarah would have liked you," he said quietly. "She was practical, like you, not afraid of hard work." A small smile touched his lips. "But she loved beautiful things too. Poetry, music." He gestured to the view. "This place. She chose it herself, when she knew she was dying." The intimacy of the moment, of his sharing this part of his past, was not lost on Prudence. She must have been a remarkable woman. She was. His eyes met hers. "Lily has her eyes. And her spirit. I see a great deal of you in her as well," Prudence said. "Your thoughtfulness. Your quiet strength." Garrett seemed moved by her words, unable to respond for a moment. Then he cleared his throat. "We should head back before it gets late." As they walked down the trail, Lily running ahead, Prudence felt Garrett's hand brush against hers. It might have been accidental, the narrowness of the path bringing them close together. But when his fingers gently entwined with hers, she knew it was deliberate. They walked hand in hand, neither speaking, both understanding that something fundamental had shifted between them. That evening, after Lily was asleep, they sat together on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. The air was cool but not cold, fragrant with the scent of pine and sage. 3 more days, Garrett said softly. Prudence didn't pretend to misunderstand. Their 2-week trial period was coming to an end. Yes, she agreed. 3 days. He turned to look at her, his face half in shadow. Do you know what you want to do? The directness of the question caught her off guard, though perhaps it shouldn't have. Garrett had always been straightforward. I think so, she said carefully. But I'd like to hear your thoughts first. He was quiet for a long moment, gathering his words. When I placed that advertisement, I was looking for a practical arrangement. A mother for Lily, a helpmate for the ranch. He paused. I didn't expect to feel what I'm feeling now. Prudence's heart quickened. And what is that? Hope, he said simply. For the first time since Sarah died, I'm thinking about the future instead of just getting through each day. He took her hand, his touch gentle but sure. I want you to stay, Prudence. Not as a housekeeper or a governess. As my wife. The words hung in the night air between them, momentous and real. It's not love, not yet, he continued honestly. But I think it could be, in time. I respect you. I admire your courage and your kindness. And I find myself wanting to make you happy. Tears pricked Prudence's eyes at the simple, heartfelt declaration. I want to stay, she whispered. I want to be Lily's mother, and your wife, and make a life here with both of you. Relief and joy transformed his face. He raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. Then you will. Yes, she agreed. I will. They sat together in comfortable silence, hands still joined, as the stars multiplied overhead. It wasn't a passionate courtship from a novel, Prudence reflected. There had been no grand declarations or desperate longings. Instead, it was something more solid, more enduring, a meeting of 2 practical people who recognized in each other the possibility of happiness, of building something meaningful together. And for Prudence, who had come west seeking a new beginning, it was enough. More than enough. The wedding took place 2 weeks later in the small whitewashed church in Clearwater. The entire town turned out for the occasion, curious to see the Eastern woman who had captured Garrett O'Malley's heart. Prudence wore a simple blue dress that she had made herself, with lace at the collar and cuffs, her one concession to bridal finery. Lily served as her attendant, proudly holding a bouquet of late-blooming wildflowers and wearing a new dress that matched Prudence's. As they exchanged their vows, Prudence looked into Garrett's eyes and saw not just the man he was, but the man he would become as they built their life together. And when the minister pronounced them husband and wife, it was Lily who cheered the loudest, throwing her arms around both of them in a fierce hug. We're a real family now, she declared, loud enough for the entire congregation to hear. The celebration afterward was held at the ranch, with neighbors bringing dishes to share and someone producing a fiddle for dancing. As evening fell, lanterns were lit in the yard, casting a golden glow over the gathering. Prudence found herself standing slightly apart, watching as Garrett talked with some of the ranchers, Lily leaning sleepily against his side. A sense of contentment washed over her, deep and true. Well, Mrs. O'Malley, said a voice beside her. It seems things worked out rather differently than I'd planned. Prudence turned to see a woman in her 40s, dressed in a green taffeta gown that was slightly too formal for the occasion. Her auburn hair was elaborately styled, and there was a tightness around her mouth that belied her attempt at a friendly smile. Miss Henderson, I presume? Prudence said, keeping her voice level. The woman nodded, her eyes assessing Prudence from head to toe. I must admit, when I sent that letter in Garrett's name, I expected you'd take one look at this wilderness and flee back to civilization. She sighed dramatically. I underestimated your resilience. Or perhaps you underestimated the appeal of a good man and a child who needed me. Prudence replied, not unkindly. Agatha's expression softened slightly. Perhaps. She glanced toward Garrett and Lily. He deserves happiness, after everything. And the child. She shook her head. Well, I'm not cut out to be a mother, in any case. Too set in my ways. Prudence was surprised by the woman's honesty. Thank you for coming today. Oh, I wouldn't miss it. The entire town has been talking of nothing else for weeks. Agatha straightened her shoulders. Besides, I wanted to see for myself what kind of woman could make a life here, when I never could. Before Prudence could respond, Garrett appeared at her side, his hand coming to rest at the small of her back. "Miss Henderson," he acknowledged, his tone polite but cool. "Thank you for attending our wedding." "I was just congratulating your bride," Agatha said, forcing a smile. "You found yourself a rare woman, Garrett O'Malley." "I know," he said simply, his hand tightening slightly on Prudence's waist. Agatha nodded, seeming to accept her defeat with as much grace as she could muster. "I should be going. Early day at the post office tomorrow." She turned to leave, then paused, looking back at Prudence. "Take care of them," she said softly, and then she was gone, disappearing into the crowd. "Are you all right?" Garrett asked, studying Prudence's face. She smiled, leaning into his side. "Better than all right. I'm exactly where I'm meant to be." He bent and kissed her, a brief but tender gesture that sent a pleasant warmth through her. "Come," he said, taking her hand. "Our daughter is falling asleep on her feet. Let's put her to bed, and then—" His eyes held a promise that made Prudence blush. Together, they collected Lily, who was indeed barely able to keep her eyes open. As they crossed the yard toward the house, neighbors called out good wishes and congratulations. Prudence felt a swell of gratitude for this new community, these people who were now her people. Later, after they had tucked Lily into bed, after the last guest had departed and the lanterns had been extinguished, Prudence stood with Garrett on the porch of what was now truly their home. His arms encircled her from behind, and she leaned back against his chest, savoring the solid strength of him. "Happy," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. "Very," she answered truthfully. Above them, the stars were scattered across the Wyoming sky like diamonds on black velvet. In the distance, a coyote called, its cry echoing across the valley. And in the quiet that followed, Prudence felt the last pieces of her heart settling into place, finding home in this wild, beautiful land and the man who had claimed it, and her, as his own. "I never thought I would find this," she confessed softly. "When I left Philadelphia, I hoped for security, perhaps companionship. But this—" She turned in his arms to face him. "This is so much more." Garrett's eyes, deep green in the starlight, held hers. "For me too," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You've brought life back to this house. To me." She reached up to touch his face, tracing the line of his jaw with gentle fingers. "And you've given me a family. A purpose." His arms tightened around her. "I promise you, Prudence O'Malley, that I will do everything in my power to make you happy. To be the husband you deserve. And I promise the same," she whispered. "To be the wife and mother this family needs." He kissed her then, a kiss that sealed their vows more truly than any ceremony could. And as they turned to enter their home together, Prudence knew with absolute certainty that the mail-order bride who thought no one wanted her had found not just acceptance, but love, in the arms of a lonely rancher and the heart of a little girl who had whispered those life-changing words. "Can you be my mommy?" The answer, she now knew without doubt, had always been yes.